I remember moving into my first apartment during college, excited yet nervous. I found a roommate, Jake, who seemed friendly enough. We clicked instantly, sharing similar interests in music and movies. But soon after settling in, I started noticing odd things. At first, it was just small quirks, like how Jake would stay up late, often talking to someone in hushed tones. I assumed he was just a night owl, but the whispers felt different, almost secretive. Sometimes, I'd wake up to soft sounds coming from his room, a faint melody playing. I brushed it off, telling myself he was just unwinding after a long day. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I had a hard time sleeping, so I quietly crept to his door, intending to ask if he wanted to watch a movie. As I stood outside, I heard him talking again, but this time it was clearer. He was addressing someone, but the responses were eerily silent. My skin prickled, and I backed away, deciding to leave him alone. Days turned into weeks, and the whispers grew louder. One evening, I returned home late and found Jake in the living room, staring blankly at the wall. I asked him if he was okay, and he simply nodded, but his eyes were vacant, as if he was trapped in another world. Things took a dark turn one stormy night. I woke up to the sound of someone sobbing in the living room. My heart raced as I tiptoed out of my room, every creak of the floorboards amplifying my fear. As I approached the living room, I saw Jake sitting on the couch, head buried in his hands. I called out his name, but he didn't respond. Suddenly he looked up, eyes wide and glassy. "Did you hear her?" he whispered, voice trembling. "She's calling for me." I felt a chill run down my spine. I tried to reason with him, asking who he was talking about, but he just kept staring past me, as if someone was in the room with us. That was the last straw. I packed my things and left the next morning. Months later, I heard rumors that Jake had been institutionalized. They said he was tormented by voices, convinced he was in contact with a girl who had died years ago. I shuddered at the thought of what I'd witnessed and realized some doors are better left closed. When I got a job in a new city, I needed to find an apartment fast. I connected with a woman named Sarah who had a room available in her place. She seemed great on our video calls, friendly and accommodating. I moved in, thrilled to start this new chapter. At first, everything was fine. Sarah was welcoming, and we bonded over late-night chats. But as the weeks passed, I began to notice odd things. Sometimes, I'd come home to find the lights on in the living room, even when she wasn't home. I'd ask her about it, and she'd just laugh, saying she forgot to turn them off. I shrugged it off, assuming it was just a minor oversight. One night, I was working late on a project. I glanced up and noticed a figure standing in the hallway. But when I blinked, it was gone. I chalked it up to exhaustion. The following night, I heard whispers in the dark, soft, unintelligible murmurs that sent shivers down my spine. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind. Things escalated when I returned home one evening to find Sarah frantically cleaning the living room. "You won't believe what happened," she gasped, her eyes wide. She told me she'd found something strange in the closet, a pile of old clothes and a diary filled with frantic entries about someone named Megan. "Megan used to live here," Sarah said, trembling. "She went missing a few years ago." My stomach twisted in knots. I felt like a cold hand gripped my heart. Sarah continued, "I think she's still here." That night, I decided to stay up, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was haunting us. As the clock struck midnight, I heard the whispers again, clearer this time. "Help me. Help me." It was a woman's voice, pleading and desperate. Terrified, I fled to the living room, but when I turned on the light, everything was still. I grabbed my phone and texted Sarah, but she didn't respond. I searched the apartment and found her room locked. Panic coursed through me as I banged on the door. "Sarah? Are you in there?" No answer. Finally, I managed to pry the door open. Inside, it was empty, her bed made, but she was nowhere to be found. I rushed to the living room, and that's when I saw it, a figure standing in the corner, her face obscured by shadows. "Help me," it whispered again, and my heart dropped. I ran out of the apartment, never looking back. I learned later that Sarah had vanished without a trace, leaving nothing but whispers behind. I never returned to that city, haunted by the specter of an unseen roommate. I was excited to finally live on my own in a cozy little studio apartment. After a few months of searching, I found a great deal on a place with a roommate named Ethan. He was quiet but polite, and I figured it would be easy living together. At first, things were normal. We shared chores and occasionally watched movies together. But soon, I started noticing strange items scattered around the apartment. Dolls with cracked porcelain faces, old photographs of strangers, and what looked like teeth in a small glass jar. "Ethan, what's with all the stuff?" I asked one evening as I cleaned up. He shrugged and said they were just things he collected. I found it unsettling but didn't want to pry. As time passed, I discovered more peculiarities. Ethan had an odd obsession with the history of our neighborhood. He'd often disappear for hours, claiming he was researching, but I began to suspect he was up to something sinister. One night, I found him digging through the garbage in the alley behind our building. When I confronted him, he looked up with wild eyes. "You wouldn't understand, I'm saving them." I decided to do some digging of my own. I started researching the previous tenants of our apartment and found unsettling reports, missing persons, strange accidents, and whispers of something dark lurking in the building. The further I dug, the more I realized there was a pattern. Ethan wasn't just collecting trinkets, he was gathering remnants of people who had disappeared, perhaps even their very essence. That weekend, I went to stay with a friend, needing space from Ethan and his bizarre behavior. When I returned, the apartment felt different. It was eerily quiet. I called out for Ethan, but there was no response. As I explored, I noticed the walls were lined with items I had never seen before. More dolls, locks of hair, and framed photos of people who looked familiar. My heart raced as I stumbled upon a locked room in the back of the apartment. I forced the door open, revealing a macabre collection of what seemed like trophies, items from his previous roommates. Panic surged through me as I realized I had to get out. I fled into the night, not looking back. I learned later that Ethan had vanished without a trace after I left. I don't know what became of him, but I still have nightmares about that apartment and the things he collected.